Hi all, it's Mrs. Keneally here. Sorry I'm not here today, but we're still going to be doing our lesson kind of as normal. So the way this lesson's going to work is I'm going to talk you through the topic that we're going to be doing today. You'll still have your 5-minute test, you'll still have some tasks to do, but then after I go through everything, you're going to have some time with the textbook to make some notes on what we've discussed. So there are some exam questions and techniques that I want to go through in the lesson, and I may give you some time to write that down. But actually, all the key content you are going to write down after using the textbooks. So please don't feel you have to write anything unless I tell you need to write this down. So we're going to be looking at arousal today, and we're going to be looking at stress management techniques. We are going to start with our 5-minute test. So if you can just turn to the back of your books. If you haven't got a book, you just need to ask for some paper, and we'll be doing it on the topics that we covered last lesson. So whoever you're with now might be quite nice and might give you a couple of minutes just to read through your notes while we get ready for your 5-minute exam. So if the teacher that's there has decided to give you a couple of minutes, if they just pause it here, otherwise I'm going to go straight on to the questions for you. So your 5-minute test. Questions are up there on the board. As you can see, they're AO1, AO2 or AO3. Remember, that shows how much knowledge you need to put into them. So the first one, what are the 6 types of feedback? A little clue there for you with repping. Okay, and that's 6 marks. Question 2 is to evaluate negative feedback by giving a disadvantage of using this type of feedback. So evaluate negative feedback by giving a disadvantage of using this type of feedback. Okay, so that's 1 mark there. And then the last one for AO1 and AO2, explain manual guidance and give an example of when this would be used. So you've got 5 minutes. If the teacher could just pause me, give you the time, because I'm going to move straight on to the answers now. So pause me and then you can start again in a moment. Okay, so moving on to the answers. Up on the board, you've got the answers there. Okay, so we've got what are the 6 types of feedback, their knowledge of results, extrinsic feedback, positive feedback, knowledge of performance, intrinsic feedback, and negative feedback. The next one, evaluate negative feedback by giving a disadvantage of using this type of feedback. The answer is can be very demoralising, particularly for beginners, or too many negative comments can leave a performer struggling to know how to respond. We spoke about this in quite a lot of detail in our last lesson about a coach that you may have that actually gives a lot of negative feedback. Explain manual guidance and give an example of when this can be used. Manual guidance involves the coach physically moving the performer into the correct position or supporting them. An example could be supporting a gymnast to do a handstand. Okay, so that is your marks there. It is out of 6, 9. Okay, so if you can give yourself a mark out of 9, whoever is covering you, if they could just make a list of what grades you've got, just so I can add them to my spreadsheet. Just make sure you pause if the pupils just need a little bit longer on those answers, because I'm going to move on to our topic today, which is arousal. So our lesson objective, we're going to be able to define arousal. We're going to be able to draw the inverted U graph and describe what it shows. We're going to be able to analyse what type of skills need high arousal and what need low arousal levels. And we're going to be able to give practical examples. As you can see there, we have an AO1, AO3 and AO2 part of our lesson today. So we need the define, which is the AO1, and the draw. We've got our analyse and our kind of describe, which is our AO2 and the AO3. So by the end of this lesson, you're going to be able to do all those 3 things. The success criteria for this. So if you're looking at a grade 4 or 5, you're going to be able to give an accurate definition of arousal and draw an inverted U graph. To get grade 6 to 7, you're going to be able to draw the inverted U graph with X and Y axes labelled correctly, describe what the inverted U graph shows, and look at the relationship between arousal level and performance level. And then for our top grades, 8 and 9, you're going to be able to analyse the arousal level required for gross or fine skills, and you're going to be able to provide practical examples. Okay, so think about the grades that you're kind of working around. We're really between the 4 and 5 and the 6 and 7. That's what you should be able to do by the end of this lesson. So like I said, we're going to start on arousal today, and some of the pictures on the board there just show some of the different emotions that you go through when you take part in sport. Have a little think back, think about when you've performed at a high level or under quite a lot of stress, and actually how you were able to manage with this. And this is what we're going to look at today. Not just elite, we can think about what we do as well. So the key term for arousal is it's a physical and mental, a physiological and psychological state of alertness, readiness, varying from deep sleep to intense excitement or alertness. Okay, so it's those two absolute extremes on the spectrum there of deep sleep to intense excitement. Okay, and it can impact our performance levels. So when you go to write these notes later from the textbook, please make sure that you write down this key term because it's quite straightforward and could be some easy marks for you. Okay, I've put on the screen now a picture of Usain Bolt. Those of you that have seen him perform know that actually he can be quite comical. Before a race, fist bumping maybe with someone that's there with him, but it is his way of dealing with his arousal levels to allow him to focus. The types of things that he might be feeling is quite anxious, pressure, nervous, ready, scared, focused, alert, excited, okay, and motivated. These could be all the types of things that he's going through right now, but you won't realise that. We're just going to watch a video now. It is, I think it was done by Gatorade, and it was about Usain Bolt, and it kind of followed loosely his life and how he dealt with the pressures. Okay, and it's called The Boy Who Learned to Fly. So we're just going to watch this now, just so we can have a little look at kind of arousal levels, how it impacted him, and how he overcame it.
Usain, you're gonna be late. No worries, Mama. Hey, wait, you forgot your lunch. Oh, that boy. Not gonna be late. 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 Whoa. Oh, excuse me. Yo. Sorry about that.
Hey boy, what's the matter with you?
Not gonna be late. Not gonna be late. Not gonna be late. Not gonna be late. Usain, you're gonna be late. No worries, Mama. Hey, wait, you forgot your lunch. Oh, that boy. Not gonna be late. 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 Whoa. Oh, excuse me.
Yo.
Sorry about that.
Hey boy, what's the matter with you?
Not gonna be late. Not gonna be late. Not gonna be late. Not gonna be late.
You're saying, right? You know, I don't think I'm going to eat all of this. You want it? Okay, then. It's yours. If you can beat him in a race.
Race? Him?
Come on, just from here to that tree.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh my god! Yes! I just beat him! I win! I win!
Okay. Okay.
win.
Here's your lunch track star. You know you're good, but if you want to be great, you're gonna have to take this more seriously. Here comes teenage sensation Usain Bolt speeding down the stretch. Oh my God! Look at this kid.
Usain Bolt is on his way. The other men are trying to follow as best they can. Nobody.
This youngster is absolutely incredible. It's the towards the finish line.
What's the matter, you saying?
What if I don't win?
What if you don't win? Since when did you become so serious, boy?
Don't make me go there, Mama, please.
Look at yourself, you saying. You're worried about the big race, worried about the big crowd out there. So many worries on your mind that you forgot which shoe goes on which foot. Maybe you forgot who you are too. The boy I know has no worries, because all worries ever do is weigh you down. You saying you have to remember, you can always go faster when you keep it light. You see?
Okay. No worries, Mama.
Keep it light, you say.
Will Usain Bolt strike yet again?
So just by watching that video, you can see that Usain Bolt was feeling quite anxious, quite nervous beforehand, and actually his arousal levels would have been too high. It would affect his performance. So what we're looking at there is how he was actually put in a better frame of mind and how he can actually utilize that to perform to the best of his ability. So this is where we come on to the inverted U theory. This was the second part, so you hopefully now can all define arousal or know what it is. And then we've got the inverted U theory. So optimal performance occurs when the performer reaches the optimal level of arousal. So you do need to have some, okay, but if it goes too much, obviously it can impact performance. And likewise, if you don't have enough, you're not going to perform to the best of your ability. You are more likely to perform at your best when you're in the best possible physical and mental state of mind. You can probably think back to a time where pressure's been put on you, or you didn't feel quite right, or you actually put pressure on yourself, and it actually meant that you didn't perform to the best of your ability. Little task I want you to do now is with a partner, I want you to discuss the graph on the next slide, and I want you to tell me what you think it means. So this is the inverted U theory. This is the graph. I want you to have a chance to look at it. Then I want you to discuss and feed back to the teacher what you think this graph means. Okay, so the graph's there on the board. It's the optimal level of arousal. We have best performance, low, high arousal, and you've got your low, high in performance as well. So if the teacher can just pause me for a sec, just to give you a chance to discuss this and feedback. I'm going to carry on, so just pause me and then carry on. Okay, so hopefully looking at that table, okay, so looking at this table, I hope you've managed to take from it that there is an optimal level. So your arousal level needs to be pretty much in the middle of between low and high. That is how you get your top end performances. If your arousal level is low, so is your performance. If your arousal level is too high, your performance is low. So this is called the inverted U theory. You can see it looks like a U, but it's upside down. So inverted means upside down, the other way around, okay? So it is the inverted U theory, okay? So to have optimal level of arousal, best performance possible, you need to link your arousal to your performance. So if you have a little look in the middle of the U, okay, is in between low and high arousal levels, and that gets your highest performance. So if you think back to a lesson or a game that you played that you weren't really into it, okay, you weren't motivated for it, your arousal levels would have been quite low, which by turn would mean your performance was low. Likewise, if you get too worked up, let's say you're playing a rugby game and someone is trash talking you, they've been in your ear all game, they've been getting little cheap shots at you, everything throughout the game, your arousal levels might get incredibly high. Okay, and actually that does mean your performance will be low. You will lose control. Okay, and that's where you need to make sure you have that optimum level of arousal to have your best performance. So now we need to link the skills to optimal levels of arousal. So the optimal level of arousal varies according to the skill that's being performed. So gross movement skills, so these are big movements. So if you remember, they're big muscle groups are gross movement skills. These skills generally require higher levels of arousal. The mind and body need to be very alert to ensure that the strength, endurance, and speed required to perform the skill is available. The opposite side, fine movement skills. So remember, these are smaller movements, might be a flick of the wrist in badminton to try and get that shot over the net. These skills generally require lower levels of arousal. Mind and body need to be calm to ensure that coordination and concentration required to perform the skills and precise movements are present. Okay, so optimal level of arousal changes for skill. It also changes for sport as well. Okay, so think about that inverted U theory, but it can change ever so slightly depending on the skill and the sport. So on the screen now, I've shown you the inverted U theory for two different sports, for golf and for weightlifting. Now you can see it's moved ever so slightly across the emotional kind of arousal section for golf compared to weightlifting. We know that weightlifting has gross movements, it's big muscle groups. Okay, so therefore your arousal levels have to be quite high. If you think about golf, if that was, say, a putt in golfing, okay, it's quite low muscle, small muscle groups being used, so fine motor skills. So golf actually would need a lower arousal level. Okay, if you can imagine the weightlifter, think about how hyped they get up, how much they need to make sure they're motivated, they're ready. If you took that same energy into a golf putt, okay, then you'll have high arousal levels, which means your performance will be low. Okay, so that's how it can differ between different sports, but you will need to be able to draw that graph. Okay, so the inverted U theory graph, you would have to draw that to gain more marks. So I've got an exam question for you now that I'd like you to try and answer. So I've got an exam question now that I'd like you to try and answer. It's a 3-mark exam question. So this is describe the relationship between arousal and performance as shown in the inverted U theory. So what I'd like you to do in your exercise books, if you could write the title of arousal and today's date, I then want you to write this exam question down. You won't have any other notes yet because you haven't got your exercise books, and you haven't got the textbooks, sorry. And I want to go through it with you before you make your notes. So you're going to write this exam question at the top. It's a 3-mark. Describe the relationship between arousal and performance as shown in the inverted U theory. I'm now going to go through the answer. So if the teacher can just pause me for a moment, so it can give you time to try and answer that question. Okay, so the answer is, as arousal levels increase, so does the level of performance until it reaches an optimum point around moderate arousal level. Once past this optimum point, performance decreases and they have become over-aroused and become too anxious. So there's 3 marks available for you there. If you've written something along that line, give yourself the marks, but you need to have broken it down into those 3 parts. So you needed to say, as arousal increases, so does performance. You need to talk about that optimum point around moderate arousal level. And then once past that optimum point, performance decreases as they've become too over aroused or anxious. Okay, so as long as you say that if you're past the optimum point, performance does decrease. But that is how you would get your 3 marks for that question. If you haven't got those marks, please write down the correct answer and give yourself a mark out of 3. Okay, we're actually going to move on to the second part now. So again, you're going to make notes on all of these. I'm just trying to go through and teach it as I would normally. So you don't need to write any notes just yet. We're going to move now on to managing arousal. So we're going to look at actually techniques and skills that you can use to make sure you don't get over aroused, which would then impact your performance. Okay, so again, loads of different pictures, loads of different sports on the board. And now we're going to look at how some elite athletes as well help manage their arousal levels to get their best performance. So what we're going to look at is some stress management techniques. These may be things that you've done yourself in or outside of sport. But that's what we're going to look at to start with. So it is important for a performer to be able to control their level of arousal to ensure it is as close to optimal level as possible. That's really key, that word, optimal level. That is the kind of moderate arousal. It's optimal for the sport to make sure you're not over aroused, to make sure you're also not under as well. It is possible to do this by using stress management techniques before or during a sporting performance. This doesn't have to be when you're taking part in sport. It might be that you have a little ritual before you actually go and play your sport. That'll be part of your stress management technique. It might be something you wear, something you make sure you eat before a performance. It might be listening to music. A lot of swimmers in the Olympics, headphones in, listening to music beforehand, something that will motivate them to get them to that optimal level of arousal. What I want you to have a little discussion with now, with each other in the class, share back to the teacher as well, is what do you do to manage stress? So, not necessarily sports, but if you were quite stressed out, what would you do? I've already mentioned some: listening to music, having set things that you do before an important event, what you eat, etc. Just if you want to feedback, you can. If not, just talk to the person next to you. What do you do to manage stress? Again, if the teacher can just pause me because I'm just going to move on, but you can feedback to the teacher. Okay, so on the board now, I've got some examples of stress management techniques. Okay, quite high stress activities going on here. We have Owen Farrell, he's about to take a conversion kick. We have Ronaldo about to take a free kick. Now, Owen Farrell, if you watched any of the rugby, will know that he likes to use imagery. Okay, you will watch him, he maps the path of his ball back and forward to make sure that he is imagining what this could look like. Ronaldo, before he takes a free kick, he does a lot of deep breathing. Also, you can see that he uses imagery as well. Sometimes with his eyes, he kind of thinks where he wants it to go. But Ronaldo is kind of known for doing the deep breathing. The stance that he's in that photo is to just get himself ready for that free kick. So we're going to watch 2 of these videos and then we're going to go through some more of the stress management techniques.
Just take this through. I'll give you a penalty. You've got to kick the post. To the
Okay. So first of all, line the ball, valve the front, and then
just take it through. I'll give you a penalty. You've got to kick the post. Takes the whole process.
so first of all, line the ball, valve the
Just take us through. I'll give you a penalty. You've got to kick the post. Takes the whole process.
Okay. So first of all, line the ball, the valve at the front, and aim it down the middle of the post. Hopefully, this is quite mine, but we'll put it there. Then obviously I'll walk back and make sure that's in the middle of the post. Everybody, this up. It's about how you feel. How you feel. What's best for you. But when I come back to
Just take us through. I've given you a penalty. You've got to kick the post. Takes the whole process.
okay. So first of all, line the ball up, valve the front, name it down the middle of the post. This isn't quite like mine, but I'll put it there. And then obviously I'll walk back and make sure that's in the middle. I guess when you're a young kid. I guess when you're a young kid and you're practicing your kicking, you just want to do it as much as you can. You want to get a feel for it. You want to figure out what feels good for you. I think once you're out there on the pitch, you want it to be nice and smooth. Your kick. You don't want to be rushing it. You don't want to be snapping at it. You want to be in control. I guess taking a few deep breaths and making sure that you're nice and calm before you kick. You're not still fired up from the game if you've just been involved in something and then you've done your practice. You're just ready to hopefully kick the ball over the post. I'd place the ball, obviously I lean the ball forward. Some people stand the ball up, some people lean the ball to the side and up to try and hit a sweet spot. I like to get a bit of direction of where I'm kicking the ball to, so I lean it to the middle of the post. Then from there I take 3 steps back. No, 2 steps back. 2 steps back. I take 2 steps back and then 3 to the side. With regards to the weird eyes that I do, just before I'm about to take my kick, I want to figure out the flight path of the ball, which gives me a good line into the post. And I basically draw a line with my eyes from the ball to a point right past the post. So I'd pick out whether it be a seat or a person or something in the stands. I'd pick out something small that I'd have to focus in on. Then the post become irrelevant, and then you're hopefully just kicking it to that point.
Okay, so Owen Farrell then has gone through his kicking technique. And those of you that have seen it, yes, he places the ball. He says he does a couple of deep breaths, but he does visualise that line of the ball. And he does it quite a few times. And like he says, he picks out the flight path as far as looking into the stadium, into the stand, to see who he is aiming at. He will pick the path of that ball, so he visualises it before he actually does the kick. Right, we're just going to watch this clip now on Ronaldo and his free kicks, and I just want you to look at his deep breathing. Okay, so as you can see there with Ronaldo, he takes deep breaths. He does deep breathing to calm and settle himself ready for that free kick. Very high pressured, all the fans, his team, the pressure that's on that free kick. And he does deep breathing to settle himself, to make sure he's at that optimum arousal level. So we're going to go through each of these now. So deep breathing being our first one. So when people become very over aroused, their breathing can become quite rapid and sometimes erratic. Taking slow, deep breaths can calm breathing and return it to its regular rhythm. Slower, deeper breathing increases the supply of oxygen to the brain. This helps limit arousal caused by anxiety and stress. So the key term for you there is deep breathing, taking slow, deep breaths whilst relaxed. So that's one of our first stress management techniques that we can use. And you may have done it before. Even if someone's been upset or something like that, you ask them to take deep breaths. You may think back to a competition where actually this would have been really beneficial for you, just to have that deep breath, because as it says there, it increases the supply of oxygen to the brain. If your breathing is rapid and maybe erratic, it's going to impact your performance. Okay, so deep breathing is a stress management technique that's quite frequently used. Right, the next one then is mental rehearsal, visualization, and imagery. This is very much what Owen Farrell was doing when he's tracking the flight of that ball. So these are cognitive techniques, which means they're to do with your mind. This means they change the way a performer thinks in order to change the way they behave. They help the performers relax and focus. Okay, so just some key information for you there with the differences between mental rehearsal and visualization and imagery. So rehearsing a successful performance in your mind before you go out and do it for real. Okay, so that's what mental rehearsal is. That can be done at any time. That could be done the night before. If you've got a big game and you're laying in bed, you might think about a mental rehearsal of a tackle that you're going to make, a goal kick that you're going to take, a corner, a free kick. You rehearse that successful performance in your mind. Visualization and imagery is imagining the positive outcome, such as standing on the winner's podium. Or you can imagine actually taking part in the activity or the skill to help calm your nerves. So visualization and imagery, think about and imagine that positive outcome. So mental rehearsal is the successful performance in your mind, and visualization and imagery is imagining that positive outcome. Right, there's also positive self-talk. So this is another cognitive technique. It involves reframing your thoughts, turning each negative into a far more positive thought. So if you go into a game, and I must admit, we're at Pigott Girls Football, I'm going to use it as an example. Whenever we go and we play a game, my team, the Pigott team, always say, look how tall they are, look how big they are. Okay, so straight away they're putting quite negative on it. They're thinking about, oh, we can't beat them. Look at them. They look better than us. So a positive self-talk involves reframing your thoughts, turning each negative into a positive thought. It helps reduce arousal caused by anxiety and stress, and it puts the person in a far more positive frame of mind. Okay, so another stress management technique there, positive self-talk. Okay, so we have some key terms there for you to kind of go through. We have mental rehearsal, visualization, and imagery, cognitive relaxation techniques involving control of mental thoughts and imagining positive outcomes. Positive self-talk, a cognitive relaxation technique involving developing positive thoughts about your performance. Okay. So when we look at those, you just need to make sure you're aware of what they are. So we had our deep breathing, and you've got your mental rehearsal, visualization and imagery. We've also got our positive self-talk. Okay, these are all stress management techniques which can help with your arousal levels, which can in turn help your performance. Have a little think. Is there any times you've had to use these? Positive self-talk might be one that you might use quite a bit, going into something like, I can do this. Okay, don't look at the opposition. You make sure that you turn everything into a positive thought. All right, I'm just going to give you some examples now from kind of past and current athletes and what they do with their stress management techniques. I'm going to start with Wayne Rooney. So on the evening before a Premier League football match, when he was playing for Man United, he asked the club's kit man what colour shirts, socks, and shorts the team will wear the next day. So every evening before a game. I lie in bed at night before the game and I visualise myself scoring goals or doing well. You are trying to put yourself in that moment and trying to prepare yourself to have a memory before the game. Okay, so we're looking at that rehearsing, we're looking at that imagery visualization. Knowing the exact kit he will be wearing helps him conjure up a richer, more detailed and authentic vision. I don't know if you'd call it visualization or dreaming. I've just always done it my whole life. Okay, so he needs that extra detail to make sure that he can visualize that positive outcome. For Rooney, this use of imagery, the act of creating and rehearsing a positive mental experience in order to enhance his ability to achieve a successful outcome in real life. Okay, Jessica Ennis-Hill. Prior to London 2012, Ennis-Hill revealed, I use visualization to think about the perfect technique. If I can get the perfect image in my head, then hopefully it will affect my physical performance. So again, she's looking at visualization, thinking about that perfect image. Where does she need to be? Let's say when she's throwing javelin, where that javelin needs to go, when she needs to release it, what her technique will look like on the playback, etc. That is how she impacts her physical performance. Okay, Johnny Wilkinson, so we're looking at rugby. So Wilkinson regularly performs visualization sessions before the games. You are creating the sights and sounds, the smells, the atmosphere, the sensation, the nerves, right down to the early morning wake-up call that you have, and the feeling that you have in your stomach. It helps your body get used to performing under pressure. Once the game begins and Wilkinson's required to kick for the goal, he uses a visualization routine to help him put the ball between the posts. So very much like Owen Farrell, he's using that visualization. I visualize the ball traveling along the path, imagine what the sensation of how the ball is going to feel when it hits my foot for the perfect strike. Okay, Andy Murray and Novak Djokovic. Novak and Andy Murray both use imagery to prepare for games. He was taught to visualize his shots and accompaniment of the classical music by his first coach. So again, there's our first kind of conversation about music there. Murray has even been known to make several visits to a deserted centre court in advance of Wimbledon in order to mentally acclimatise to the environment. So, and to imagine what it would be like. This is what it's like now. What is it going to be like when it's filled, when I've got my opponent there as well? I've sat on centre court with no one there and thought a bit about the court, the matches I've played. I want to make sure I feel as good as possible so I have a good chance going into the competition. Okay, so again, he is actually rehearsing, he's got the imagery there as well. Okay, so there is an example there of some athletes, past and present, and what they've used. So, what we've looked at so far today is we've looked at arousal. Okay, so hopefully you'll be able to define it. You would be able to do and tell me and draw what the inverted U theory is, and you would be able to tell me how it's different for different sports. Okay, so that's what you'll be able to do with arousal. We then look at managing your arousal and we look at stress management techniques. Hopefully, you would now be able to tell me what they are and give me some examples. Always think back to what you've done in games as well. Think about what you've done. Have you ever had to do any of these stress management techniques in sport to help you? So I'm going to give you the homework now, and then I'm going to set you on the next task. So your homework, and I'll put this on Google Classroom. I'll also put this homework on Show My Homework. You need to identify 2 gross movement skills and 2 fine movement skills that you've used in a recent fixture, competition, or lesson. For example, a rugby tackle, a golf putt. Okay. You need to sketch an inverted U graph each of these sporting situations. So a total of 4 mini graphs, because you're going to have 2 for gross movements, 2 for fine. I want you to label the axes correctly. I want you to plot your arousal level with a cross. I want you to remember that the inverted U may be in different places along the x-axis for gross and fine motor skills. So 2 gross, 2 fine, and I want you to draw 4 of these inverted U graphs. I want you to do this in your exercise book. Okay, it shouldn't take you too long, but you should be able to achieve this. Look back what gross movement and fine movement skills are. Girls that are in the class, we've just done badminton session, so you might think back to maybe a little net shot that you've done for 2 fine movement skills. You also need to revise for your 5-minute test on arousal. Right, so your task now you're each going to have an exercise book. You're each going to have a textbook, sorry. Right, so your task now, you're going to have a textbook. Now the textbook is going to look like this. Wait till this loads up. And you're going to have your key information there. So you're going to have your student book. You won't have it interactive like this, but you will have a normal copy. Now on page, what page is this? Let's just scroll down and see what page it is. Okay, so on page 98, you are going to have the page that looks like this, that is all about arousal. What I'd like you to do is I'd like you to make notes. Okay, so you're going to make notes on all of this, write the key terms. Don't copy it out word for word, but copy down some of the things that we've been talking about today. I want you to draw that inverted U theory and make sure you label it all up as well. On this here, you're then going to link the skills of optimal arousal. So that's page 98. If you go on to the next page, I've got some examples there for you. And what I'd like you then to do is have a go at this activity. So it's the activity on page 99, question 9, A, B, and C. I want you to try and answer that. After you've done that, you're then going to put a title, which is Managing Arousal Using Stress Management Techniques. And I want you to go through those as well. So we've gone through them today. Deep breathing, make sure you write down that key term. It's going on to page 100. Mental rehearsal, visualization and imagery, and positive self-talk. I want you to write down those key terms, and I want you to make sure you've got that information. Okay, we've got some there as well, pictures in the books. There is a little exam tip here. These stress management techniques are not only useful in sporting, they can help you prepare for a wide range of things. So you can use a lot of these in your everyday life. You don't have to do this activity here. You just need to make sure that you make notes on arousal and then managing stress managing techniques. Okay, so that's your task now. You need to make sure these are good, comprehensive notes. Okay, if you do finish that, I will give the teacher a extension task that you can get on with, but really that should take the rest of the lesson. Right, the homework, like I said, I'll put it on Show My Homework. Any problems, I will see you next week anyway. When we move on, please also revise for your 5-minute test. Right, thank you guys.